This is the 2019 Women in Journalism Conference holding at Oriental Hotel, Victoria Island, Lagos.
Yes, and of course, it's themed action journalism, women on the front lines.
Yeah, the interesting thing is the fact that he has women across Africa, so it's not just a Nigerian thing.
Yeah.
And some of our keynote speakers are actually people who have been in the field for a very long time. Oh, by the way, my name is Lani Amuyo.
And I am Rotimi Akinse. Of course, this event tells you a whole lot about African journalists, of course, the female journalists especially, what they have done so far. It's a way to celebrate excellence this time around. Of course, encourage innovation in the profession.
Yeah, and to think of the fact that a lot of people might believe that journalism is actually a male thing because of the whole efforts and activity that actually, is involved in journalism.
Yeah.
But if we really look at it, I think there are actually more women journalists than men.
Whatever it is, whether they are more than men, you can always say that women journalists are very brilliant. And of course, they do a whole lot when it comes to journalism, despite the fact that we have some of the women being mothers, being trainers and all of that, doing some other things. And of course, they still
Able
get
to
into
juggle
journalism.
and
Absolutely,
do the
absolutely.
And Amanpour said something you want to share with us?
I may not be able to say all of that now, but of course, there are lots of speeches about this event. Of course, it started in 2014, and of course, this is the fifth conference, talking about highlighting and supporting the works of female journalists in Africa as a whole.
Okay, so in the course of the program, we promise to bring you interesting feedbacks and stay tuned. We'll be right back in your faces.
We'll be back.
So, ladies and gentlemen, the very first speaker that's coming to the stage is a journalist, even if she questions that every once in a while. But not only is she involved in journalism as it is, she's also involved in the subgenre of photojournalism. She is a freelance journalist who doubles as a photojournalist and has been reporting from the front lines of Boko Haram in northeast Nigeria. Nelly uses photography to enhance storytelling as a genre and has increased the relevance in matching figures with actual proof. And there's something about stories that are told with visual evidence. There's a way it hits the reader or the viewer quite differently than just reading the words. And that's exactly what she's been doing. Now, with Nelly's unique style and stance as a writer, she has waded into the conflict's hot zone to document the destruction that Boko Haram has wrought on Adamawa, Borno, and other states in which the terrorists have had a presence. And Nelly may not know, but she is also making a difference. Please, ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for our very first speaker, Nelly Atang. Please come to the stage.
For the past 4 or 5 years, I lived in Yola. I call myself an accidental journalist because I never planned to practice. My whole essence, please, back to the first page. Yes. That's because I was opportune to follow an organization called the Adamawa Pacemakers Initiative, document their activities in Yola at the time when Boko Haram had just kicked off. And who remembers the Occupy Nigeria protest? So it was from the Occupy Nigeria that a lot of young people got inducted into Boko Haram. And we had to find a way to curb that. We didn't just think about when people say education or providing food and all of these things, poverty is what drives young people to to become violent extremists. So we had to look beyond giving people jobs or education. So we introduced sports. So I was just opportune to be in that space and at that time with a camera as an amateur photographer and amateur journalist to document some of this. So I will begin with this first image. This is a camp in Yola. This was the second largest camp. In fact, I went to this camp immediately after the government had announced that they had released the first sets of IDPs. So these are the first sets of IDPs who were released from Sambisa, and they had to bring them with a very heavy security to Yola for treatment. So these were the first sets of those IDPs that were released by the Nigerian army. Some of them picking up their lives after the whole crisis, after being locked up with them, Boko Haram for a while. Next. So you can see, and then stop. Back. And this particular image still speaks to me because these were young children who were, this this was the largest camp, housing about 5,000 IDPs at the time in Yola. So these were kids in the camp who were cleaning up and having a good time despite their educations being taken away from them. Next. No, hold on. And this other image, to see the work that they were doing. And I was opportune to, in fact, I'm very passionate about these girls, their story. There were a group of 100 girls who were put together in a classroom, children of Boko Haram fighters, children of survivors whose parents were actually abducted by Boko Haram themselves, and children from I've forgotten how they call them, the joint task force that government had instituted. So they all had to be together in one classroom to learn. And it was amazing to see that these kids, despite not even knowing their backgrounds, they had to just stay together and learn. And a particular girl's story caught my attention. Her name was Halima, because this girl was an armorer for Boko Haram, and she was captured at the age of 10, leaving behind her twin sister. And all she did know was, in her whole as a child, was to clean blood from guns or matches that Boko Haram would return with. So when I walked into here and I saw that these kids were together and they were singing, you wouldn't even know, but I heard there was something just particular about this girl, because you can't even kill even a fly around her, she would scream. So she was still dealing with PTSD. And then there are people that the army call Boko Haram sympathizers. So Boko Haram sympathizers are people, for instance, they identified the wives of Boko Haram fighters as Boko Haram sympathizers. And this woman's husband was a Boko Haram fighter. But the truth is that she doesn't know if he's still alive or he's dead. But because of how she's been stereotyped in the camp, it's hard for her to even mix with other women. So if you go to the camp, they have their own section in the camp at the back. I mean, at the back. So you wouldn't even find them. And they have their own small little group where they stay together, and it's like a safe space for them. And when I met her and I asked her, I said, what do you want Nigerians to remember you for? She said that I'm begging for forgiveness on behalf of my husband. But the truth is, when I later reached out to the Nigerian army to ask them more if the husbands were still alive, they said I was talking shit. They don't know what I'm talking about. So this story was the end of me chasing Boko Haram stories, because at some point I felt like my life was now in danger. Another woman, another set, another woman. Hold on. And then it's interesting. It's interesting when you cover this kind of stories to realize that beyond these people you call Boko Haram are women who are deeply in love with them. The same thing happens as well with ISIS. Young girls running away to go get married. So this particular woman, when she realized her husband had joined Boko Haram and she had warned him, so when he died, she moved and remarried immediately in the camp. So she met another IDP and they had this 18-month-old baby that she was carrying. And then this is another image that still stands. This is the image that most people identify with my name, because this little boy, I went to cover an assignment around a community in Yola, and I saw him holding on to his little brother. So I asked, are they IDPs? They said yes. Or that, yeah, they are still looking for his parents. So he was squatting with some members of the community that they were the ones taking care of him. We heard about the movie, when movie was attacked. So when Mubi was captured, this was the day Mubi was captured. These were IDPs. These were people fleeing from Mubi to Jimeta just to find safety. So if you look closely, you see a boy with his father just holding on to him. At that point, you'll be amazed how we Nigerians are also wicked. A boss who would usually charge 1,500 from Mubi to Jimeta, they were charging as much as 8,000 naira, 10,000 naira. To carry their own Nigerians to safety.
Women in Journalism Conference has always been one of the biggest conferences here in Nigeria for women who are journalists. And I remember the past one I attended was when Abike Dabiri attended, and she actually was a speaker, which was a very marvelous event. And also a lot of international journalists were there, which actually opened doors and opportunities for we who are here in Nigeria to actually know that, okay, there are opportunities out there that we can leverage on. And also, I think we also discussed about equality for we female journalists. So it
Okay.
was really interesting.
So, what are you looking forward to in today's?
Okay, well, today's zone is very different. The theme, as we can see behind us, yeah, okay, it's not even on the
Yes,
banner.
it's on the back.
It's right there. Women on the front lines. You understand? Women on the front lines. Interesting. Because you see more men on the front lines. So having a woman on the front line is very different. Number one is very different. But we women are nurture. We nurture naturally. We nurture naturally. We women are strong. For a woman to carry a baby for 9 months, it's not easy. You understand? But I think this actually just changes the perspective, and the perception of a woman that women can actually handle the front line. We can actually handle the heat of being in the battlefront.
Thank you very much. Do you know what? This is a fantastic event. And I am so happy that this is happening. A big round of applause, please, for everybody involved in this, because this is really something that our industry the world over needs more of. We need to be supporting women in our industry, and we need to be talking more about how we can help them. Now, I lived in Lagos for nearly 6 years, from 2014, and I left in July this year, so it's fantastic to be back. I do feel like I'm home. As it was said, I've been a journalist for 20 years. 10 of those, I was staff at the BBC. And then the next 10 years, I went freelance, based in India, then in Paris, then here in Nigeria. I'm working for lots of different broadcasters, international broadcasters, and newspapers and online outlets. What exactly is frontline reporting, and how do you get to be successful at it? I think that there are three main elements. Opportunity. Women need to have an opportunity to be able to get out there and do it. Also training and mentoring. We've mentioned quite a bit about this, and it really is crucial. And then there is the risk assessment and the planning. And it's interesting hearing from Nellie and hearing from Mayeni, because I can relate to a lot of what they said. I even have my door stopper with me as well, just in case anything happens. And when I'm out in the field, because I'm a freelancer, I don't have a satellite phone. I don't have that luxury that a big news organization might give you. But I always go out with a backup mobile phone, several different SIM cards on different networks. Small little things like that we need to be thinking of. But I think what's interesting is, over the years that I have been in this industry, the idea of frontline reporting has really changed, and it's changed quite dramatically. You go back 20 years and we kind of have this image of, there you are on the front line, the battle lines are drawn, you're with the good guys versus the bad guys, you're standing there with a big microphone in front of the camera, there's mortars whizzing over your head, and you're doing your piece. And that's what people think frontline reporting is. But it's not now. Why? Because the front line is anywhere. It is not just, the battle lines of a war zone. The dangers have increased. The risks to female journalists have increased. And I think if we look at, for example, the Boko Haram conflict, the ISWAP conflict, it's in its 10th year now. It's been really difficult to report that. Why? Because you simply cannot get the access. You can't get into these areas. I remember back in 2014, I had a lot of conversations with editors in Toronto with the CBC News about where we could go and how we could report the conflict. And of course, post the Chibok schoolgirls story, when that really hit the world stage, there was a big focus on Nigeria, and people wanted to know more. But the fact was that if you want to go anywhere outside of Maiduguri, for example, you have to get military permission. And that simply wasn't happening. And I think it still continues to be a big issue. So in terms of actually reporting the conflict, there are the risks of kidnap, the risk of landmines, ambushes, suicide bombers. So sometimes you're reliant on local stringers, for example, up in the Northeast, getting you the day-to-day stories. And then what you do is you try to look at the wider, bigger picture and do bigger stories, which is what I did when I went up to the Northeast. And not that long ago, there was a foreign journalist who contacted me and she said, "You know what, Anna? People haven't been covering this story properly." She didn't live in Nigeria. She was outside. She said, "We're going into the Sambisa forest. We're going to stay there overnight. We're going to report the conflict because people haven't been doing it." And I kind of nodded and went, yeah. Do you know what? There's a reason why nobody's inside the Sambisa, apart from the fact that it's still got landmines in, so we hear, etc. And she was adamant that, it hadn't been done right and the story needed to be told. We were missing out. And she did come over. I think she spent 30 minutes on the ground in Pulka, got a UN flight out there, and no, didn't go to the Sambisa forest, funnily enough. But there's a lot of issues and a lot of places that we describe as hostile environments. It's certainly not restricted to the Northeast. I mean, it's already been mentioned today, a riot in Abuja where you come under live fire. Yeah, that's a hostile environment. A few months back, I was reporting the collapse of a school in Lagos Island. The police opened fire on the crowd at the end of the night as a form of crowd control. I was live on Al Jazeera and suddenly this massive stampede came behind me and a colleague grabbed me away from, out of the stampede. I continued talking, but it's a dangerous environment. But I put myself out there and I do it because I love this job. I'm Anna Cunningham and I'm a freelance multimedia correspondent. I was based in Nigeria since 2014 up until July this year.
Okay, you've been a journalist for over 20 years. You've been in Nigeria for a while. What are some of the challenges you think journalists are facing based on your observation in Nigeria?
In Nigeria, I think there are a lot of challenges. There's the issue of opportunity. We need to see more women getting out there and telling those stories because the fact is that women will talk to women. And they're often, particularly if you're working in hostile environments, conflict zones, up in the Northeast, you go into these IDP camps and they don't want to be talking to a man. These women have experienced some really horrific things. And that's where we as female journalists have the opportunity to give them a platform and to tell those stories. So I think news editors need to be giving more opportunity to women to go out there and do that. And I think there needs to be a lot of care taken in terms of addressing safety and security for journalists, because now more than ever, we are at risk and we are a target, sometimes just simply because people don't want you to tell the story, especially if it puts somebody in authority or some situation in bad light. So I think media houses and editors need to carefully think about the responsibility when they're sending journalists out. And ultimately, that can boil down to doing more training with female journalists to allow them to make the right decisions when they're out in the field, to be safe when they're on assignment, and to be able to get the story and come back and get that story out.
Okay. Speaking, you have an experience of over 20 years. Has there ever been a time where there was a job and they looked at you and said, "Oh, you're a female, you can't handle it, let's give it to a man"?
I've certainly had job interviews where I've been up against men, and I knew before I went into the job interview that they weren't going to give it to me, because they wanted a man. And, it's very difficult that. And I think there certainly needs to be more equality in newsrooms. I don't want to see women making the tea and coffee and, be the person who's on reception or answering the phones. There's a huge amount of talented people, and they deserve to get those editorial positions, to get those producer positions, to be the reporters and correspondents out there. I mean, the times when I have found it difficult has been when I was pregnant. Editors thought I was a bigger risk in terms of actually going and doing stories in what would be classed as conflict zones, hostile environments. And it took some persuading, but I think when you're talking, if it's talking to a male editor and you're saying, I'm not sick, I'm pregnant, this is what happens to women. And, I'm still capable of doing the story and doing my job, then, there are editors out there who are willing to change the tide and really, get more women accepted in the industry that we work in.
All right, so one final thing. What advice would you give female journalists in Africa, then maybe streamlined to Nigeria?
I think have faith in your talents and have faith in yourself, because ultimately you're the first person who needs to look out for yourself. I think it's difficult times at the moment. We're hearing lots of stories about journalists being stopped or detained, not knowing what's happened to somebody, if they've been arrested. There are big questions, and we need to look out for each other as female journalists. And I think keep believing in what you're doing. If you keep believing in what you're doing, then more people will continue to believe in it, and we'll see an improvement in terms of more and more women getting out there doing the job of a journalist.
What are some of the challenges that female journalists are particularly vulnerable to? One of them is not being taken seriously. On the surface, that might seem like quite a trivial thing. They don't take you seriously, doesn't matter, get on with it. The problem is, if you're not, that can endanger your life. So not being taken seriously, that can be by your editors. If your editor underestimates how much danger you're going to be in because he thinks you're a woman and you're a little bit skittish, he or she might not necessarily provide you with the support, logistical support and security support that you need in a high-risk area. So that's one way in which women are disadvantaged compared to their male counterparts. When we go to high-risk areas, we often have to collaborate with the military or with local NGOs in order to secure ourselves. That's another way that you can be secure. So if you're not taken seriously by those organizations, they can also not protect you in a way that's adequate. And finally, you cannot be taken seriously by the audience, by the people that you interview, by the people who watch you. And day to day, that can mean that they don't, provide you with the same amount of support as they would a male counterpart. As Nelly was saying before me, you might go with some men on assignment and they might assume that it's the man with you that's the correspondent instead of you. That's not necessarily a security matter, but I think it plays into this whole idea of women. When I'm in a high-risk area, my security is not being prioritized, I'm not being taken seriously. So some of the ways you can mitigate that, you're a woman, you're not going to be able to change your gender. I think it's incredibly important to communicate with your editors before you go. If you're being sent to Maiduguri, for example, look at what security incidents have happened there in the last 6 months. If you're trying to prove that you might need a security guard or you might need to be in touch with your editor on a regular basis, explain to them that this is what's happened in the last 6 months. I think that this is going to be risky. Make sure that you have a conversation with your editors. Let them know the address of where you're going to be, your telephone number. If there are some free apps, you don't necessarily need to use a security app. You could use Google Maps as a way for your editor to track you wherever you are. Other things that you can do is, as Nelly was saying, having a good fixer on the ground, somebody who knows the area really well, can help enormously. They speak the local language, they have local intelligence. So I would definitely take advantage of your fixers, and a driver is incredibly important. When we go on high-risk assignments, you'd be surprised. Some drivers are so excited to be with a media crew. They want to come with you and listen to your interviews or come with you while you're filming. Your driver should always stay in the car wherever he's parked his car, he or she, but often they're men, wherever he or she's parked his car, you need to make sure that they are facing the way out when they're parking, so that if you need to make a swift exit, they can. You need to make sure that they always have credit on their phone, so if you need to reach them in the middle of the night, you can. These are some of the ways that you can try and mitigate your personal safety as a woman when you're out in the field. Again, I think that one of the benefits of being a woman, I quite like when I go in a high-risk area, I often have a male driver. My cameraman's a man. My producer during elections was a man, although now she's a woman. And I'll have a male security guard. And a woman in that team means that often all the focus on security is on you. Everybody thinks you're this delicate flower that's not going to make it out there. And they all kind of vie to show you that they're going to protect you. So in a way, I find being a woman in that kind of masculine environment, I find myself to be more protected. So it's not all doom and gloom. In terms of the audience or interviewees that I go and see, I have when I'm out in the field, I don't look particularly feminine. I'll wear baggy shirts, baggy trousers. I have a deep voice. So sometimes we went to Niger State in September of last year to cover the floods, and people were talking and I didn't know what they were talking about. My fixer was laughing and he was like, oh, they're debating. They don't know if you're a man or a woman. And I was like, perfect. Don't even tell them anything. Don't clarify anything. Just leave them to guess if I'm a man or a woman. Because I like that ambiguity. I like that on the phone when I answer the phone. I find that if I answer the phone and somebody is like, yes, sir, I know that things will get done. So I don't even correct them to say, oh no, it's ma or it's madam. I just keep it ambiguous. So, everybody has a different style. I wouldn't encourage you to dress more masculine in the field. But for me, maintaining that gender ambiguity, in certain areas I find kind of protects me, and it takes away the second big danger I find of being a woman journalist on the front line, which is the potential for sexual harassment and sexual assault. Women are usually, physically weaker than their male counterparts. Sexual assault is a problem across Nigeria and across many parts of the country. So it's one of the things, I certainly think about before I deploy. I have a checklist before I leave my house, before every assignment, and there are certain security things that I take with me that I brought with me here today. So one of the things that I have is this very sexy looking doorstop. You put a massive battery at the back and you can wedge it at the bottom of your hotel door. So if you're staying in a hotel and you're worried for whatever reason that somebody might try and enter your room at night, these can be bought quite easily online, and I'm sure Nigerian entrepreneurs, being as entrepreneurial as they are, that you can find this in the market somewhere in Lagos. So you wedge it under your door, and if anybody tries to open the door, this happens. So it's loud enough that if you're asleep, somebody can, you'll hear them before they come into your room. So I think being a woman in Nigeria, a female journalist in Nigeria, has a lot of advantages and disadvantages. Some of the advantages I find, often in Africa, people underestimate women. So if you're trying to get an interview, they're more maybe likely to give it to you because they think you won't ask them questions that are as tough. And then sometimes a lot of interpersonal skills are required as well. Working in the Nigerian environment, you need to be friendly to people, respectful. And I often find that as a woman, people are more receptive to me. They're less combative, they're less shut down. Obviously, there are disadvantages as well. You're not always taken very seriously, which can put your life at risk. So if you try and tell your editors that I think this situation is risky, they might not take you as seriously as your male counterpart. And then you also have the problem of harassment when you're out in the field, sexual harassment based on your gender. So you always have to have your wits about you. I think it's very important to have women in the front lines, in conflict areas, reporting, because many of the people, a large percentage of the people that are affected by conflict are women and children, families. And especially in more conservative parts of the country like the Northeast, talking to a woman, getting her perspective will be difficult if you're a man. So having a female journalist allows you to enter the home, allows you to shed a light on how the conflict is affecting ordinary people. War and conflict, especially when you live in southern Nigeria, can feel very far removed from you. So it helps to have human stories, personal stories, so people can understand the impact of war. And I think bringing women's stories forwards really helps you do that.
What do you think? Women working in the front lines, on the front lines, in conflict areas, very hostile environments. Do you think it's worth it in Nigeria, especially when we do not have media organizations who give insurance and, of course, give enough security measures to protecting them?
Yes, thank you very much. I think part of what we discussed today has to do with security, has to do with insurance. That's a big challenge. Uh, Journalism is something we all are passionate for, even as women in Nigeria, but that still, it's like an impediment on the way to progress. You still want to do this job, you want to give out everything, you want to put your life on the line, but when you look at the security apparatus, you look at it, you don't have enough medical insurance, you don't have proper insurance. It looks like a big challenge. I think until media owners and media organizations take the bull by the horn, copy international organizations and make sure that international based standards are kept to. I think we still have a long way to go. It's not easy. We have families to think about. We have babies. We have children. So when you think about all this, you're like, is it really worth it to die for this country? But I think media owners should take it's more serious about it and have the political will to do the right thing. Thank you.
Am I the only one who's curious? So please, you're on the hot seats. Make your way to the stage. Be coming. Why you? Why a man? Why women in journalism? Why? Give us an answer.
Oh, wow. They've asked me that question like 3 times today already, and I've avoided it. But I'm going to answer it now once and for all. So my passion has been journalism, actually, for a very long time, since 2001. And when I discovered that over the past 15 to 18 years, most of the bosses that have made an impact on my life have been women, starting from the late Alima Atta, who gave me my first attempt at PR in 2003. When I got my first job, we were essentially just 2 of us. I think I was our first staff back in 2003. So she trained me in PR. Then to Mrs. Tony Saraki, who then became my boss for about 4 years. And then after that, I did some work with Mo Abudu as a writer. Over the years, it's always been women who have encouraged me in my career and everything that I've done. So that was one reason to go into this. But my passion for journalism, when we were talking about doing the first journalism conference back in 2013, the focus wasn't women at all. It was journalism. But what eventually happened was we approached the Institute of the Nigerian Union of Journalists, and they said, oh, we have a lot of things that we do already. We have trainings that we organize. We have our conferences. So we're not interested in another conference. And then one of our team members said, oh, there's an association of women journalists. Why not approach them? So we approached them, and just like, the way women are, they were like, oh, it sounds like a good idea. Let's do something with it. So, and that was how the first Women in Journalism conference came about. It was because women were interested in doing something to improve themselves. That essentially is what happened in 2014. So I hope that answers your question.
I feel like the conversation is very important. And when we have that kind of conversation in conferences like this, and the right people see it, then you then begin to cause a change. So it might not happen immediately, but it will happen eventually. One of the biggest challenges of media organizations in Nigeria is funding. And so continuously, as more and more opportunities are given to Nigerian journalists, locally and internationally, you will discover that even the media houses are going to be forced to change. And one of the biggest issues is pay. Monthly pay for journalists is really, really poor in Nigeria, and we hope that will improve. Insurance for journalists, that's also very, very key and also very, very important. Training for them when they're on the front lines. Every once in a while we hear about journalists being killed or being lynched or getting assaulted and things like that. But a lot of times you don't hear that about foreign journalists. You only hear that about Nigerian journalists or even interns and things like that. That's what we hear. And that's not the kind of thing that we should be hearing. So when there's more training, when there's more exposure for Nigerian journalists, you will discover that they are getting better, they do well, and the organizations themselves are more responsible. They take up that responsibility to say, this is my person, we're going to protect him, we're going to ensure that his family is taken care of if something happens to him. So I feel like a conference like this, starting that conversation, is the most important thing. Now, look, the government has a responsibility, and the responsibility is to provide security and also guarantee the freedom of press. That is their responsibility, and that is what the government needs to do. Everything else is the responsibility of the media owners themselves, and also the responsibility of the journalists to ensure that they're trained and they get the right kind of exposure. So the government's role, just ensure that you provide security or an enabling environments for people to be able to dwell in safety. Now, once that is being taken care of, the next thing is then to ensure that the government guarantees the rule of law and the freedom of the press. That is their role. So the government really should step aside when it comes to press freedom, because a lot of things that are going on now in especially in a country like Nigeria, a lot of people are now saying that they feel like we're going back instead of moving forward when it comes to press freedom. People are being attacked because of maybe social media comments. Journalists are being arrested. They're trying to stifle journalism in many different areas. So those kind of things need to change. And so the government should not be trying to play an active role in the media, because that is not their space. So they should focus on what they are supposed to be doing. And then the media is supposed to be holding government accountable for their actions. And also exposing things like corruption and other things that, so essentially that's the role of the media. And it is guaranteed by the Constitution, press freedom. So that is what I feel the government needs to do at this time.
I was just telling somebody out there that what's missing is that there are very few people who study the course they are interested in. There are very few people who are doing the profession they are interested in, because if you are interested in your profession and you have a passion for it, it doesn't matter where the wind blows, whether your pay is 10 naira or 20 naira, you will survive. Because if you stick with it, if you stick with your job, you will make it successfully however you choose. But it's a choice. And I think Mayoni said that clearly. It's a choice that you've got to make. I chose to be a reporter, but I haven't done the job of an active reporter in the past 15 years. But I've been a TV producer and a presenter. You find that what I do, I find a way to inject my reportorial knowledge and skill into it. And I did that because I had kids to raise. I had to earn an income, right? But today, guess what? They're grown. My last kid has gone home to school now. So now I'm freer. And I'm beginning to go back to the investigative journalism I so desire. I can afford to go out and say, I'm going to take a camera hire. 40,000 naira. I'm flying to a lorry to go and find out, really, who are those pastors that know Pastor Bruno at Fatoyibo? I can do that. And if I did that, and I'm wishing that many more young women, because the truth is, and I don't have a television station. It took me a long time to realize I have a phone, I can do magic. I want to be on the streets. There are things I see. There was once I was walking, taking a walk to church in the morning. I decided to walk that day, and I saw the gutter around my house. And I just did a little video because it was disgusting. And I tagged the Lagos State government. Guess what? They came to move the trash. The next week I was walking, the trash was gone. Use your phone. Be that investigative journalist that you want to be because you want to be so. Use it, not because somebody is paying you, but because you want to tell a story. And I say women are the best reporters. Anna said something to that effect. Because people would rather speak to women. They would rather speak to women. There's something about us. If you do your job well, you will get it. Why aren't you getting those fantastic stories? Before you know it, it's going viral. Be earning your job, earn your income. This is Nigeria, we know. But follow your passion while you are earning an income. And please negotiate good salaries.
It's been an amazing time at the Women in Journalism Conference 2019 here at Oriental Hotel, Victoria Island, Lagos. And we do hope that women in journalism have actually been able to take on one or two things. They've been able to rekindle the fire they had or the once had for journalism. And we hope that they would make best use of what they've learned today and run with it. Educate themselves, get trainings, not get laid back by what is happening, not get beaten down by the society, and actually do a lot more to get a lot of stories out there to the faces of people. From Oriental Hotel, Victoria Island, Lagos, I am Moyo Lania, reporting for AIG Media Pro TV.